important thing for us to appreciate is that land conflicts are with us and here to stay. From the north to the south, from the east to the west, world over, land remains one of the key issues that has had the most important impact. And the conflicts that arise from there have consumed everyone who is involved. The question is, if we really have to put together our plans to resolve land conflicts, we have to be very careful in our analysis. We need to map who is responsible for some of this. We need to look at the land-relevant legislations. I think every day in Uganda we come up with very appropriate laws, and the question we have is how are they implemented or how are they played out in terms of application. We have to talk about proposed designs or interventions, and I'm very glad that SHED is already doing a lot of work in this area, and all I could say is continue with this and probably multiply into other areas and districts in the country. Of course, we have the traditional approaches, we have the administrative structures, and then we'll talk about the rest. Next slide. What are the shared experiences? Extrapolating from work that I have been involved in Karamoja, in over 4 districts, in West Nile, in 8 districts, and other research I have done among the Basongora Banyawindi in Kasese and the Banyabutumbi in Kanongo. And it is this wealth of experience that I want to draw on to make us appreciate some of the things that we need to think about in terms of land. We reviewed and have been reviewing a lot of court cases, certificates, customary certificate of ownership. We've got a lot of literature. They bring to question and accountability those responsible for managing land. And then documents and a couple of other interviews that we have held. So what are the conflict drivers in the districts of Kayunga, Kampala, Wakiso? Land grabbing, pressure on land due to population, family or clan, land boundary conflicts are so many as a result of poor mapping of this land. Land titles are not clear. People keep buying just using agreements, and then they measure using, you know how they say, you know, like they draw a ruler, but then what does that imply when you do the maps on this land? And then, of course, sometimes when we are setting up policies, creating more districts, or cutting up districts so that we create more opportunities for services to be brought, it does have an impact on how land conflicts play out. And then, of course, there's deprivation of women from land ownership. This cuts across, it's not only in these districts, but it cuts across all the regions that I have told you that we have worked in. And one thing that is very clear when it comes to land deprivation is that sometimes it is inadvertent, and the reason I'm using the word inadvertent is that someone thinks because the father or the wife, rather the husband died but had left him digging here was okay, he's not really wanting to steal your land. But what does that imply? When this person dies, the wife cannot tell you go away because my husband lent you this land. The husband insists, or rather the squatter insists, no, but he allowed me to stay. Then the babies of that squatter do not even know that that land did not belong to someone else. So they grow up knowing this is their land, and this aggravates any little land conflict that starts. And when you listen to some of the stories in the field, they definitely show you that the person who is fighting for the land, or the squatters' children fighting, have very little knowledge of history. I'm not from the history department, and that's why I'm passionate about saying this. They don't know the history of this land, but they are saying their parent owns this land, and until the clan members or until the village heads come together, that conflict never ends. Let's think about illiteracy. When you say we are going to solve land problems, the assumption we are making, and I walked in when they were giving some very good statistics of how many women own land in this country. I think, was it 20%? 60. There was a figure given, at least I remember the figure. 16%. The assumption we have is that all these women are the same. Or they are the same level of maybe learning, I don't want to say academics, but they're the same level of literacy, and that is not the case. Now, because these are really the sparks that cause the kind of conflicts, we have to think about what are the possible solutions. And often I think you've heard when people say when you find a solution, sometimes you're treating the symptoms. So these were probably the symptoms, right? That we just talked about, the proximate causes. But what are the underlying causes of land conflicts in this country? Some people have traced them to land tenure systems. They talk about the customary land ownership, the leaseholds, the freeholds, and all these, they argue, are key in determining or causing the bigger land issues and conflicts that we're talking about today. The speaker also mentioned lack of funds, women don't have money to go and go to lawyers, women don't have money. Sometimes the cases have left the courts in the districts and are now even going a bit higher. The district leadership says, come with your land conflict. But the village and the clan system has shown that this little woman or old woman owns this land. But because the aggrieved person knows that he cannot treat this history, he prefers to take the case to the court, where they will use a lot of English, therein, whereby, thereafter. Those of you who are lawyers here know better than I do. And consequently, this woman could easily lose her land. But what are the recommendations? It's okay, go ahead. We have done work for FAO in different regions, and they have a very good system, which I think we need to benchmark as shared. If we are going to be solving land problems, could we please at least try to map the causes? Before any investment is made on land, could we ask the investor to do a due process? We talk about mapping, we talk about monitoring and evaluation. So who is doing this for us and who is allowing us to buy this land? And the synergy that I really want to come out maybe in this is I see UN Women, I see Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund and SHARE. I think when we piggy bank means you use others' wealth of knowledge to see what they are doing to avoid duplication. It does help us to solve the kind of problems of land that we may have. What that means in Karamojong is our land, our life. And if we have to continue to manage our issues, there are a string of recommendations. The force that the United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 emphasizes are 4 pillars, and that is participation, allow the women to participate, allow the women to protect them but also allow them to protect, allow the men to support them. In all our country, in Uganda, I think there is a bit of change in terms of spousal support. I cannot give it any figure, but I think it is very, very important that, and that is what the Karamojong are now demanding, that before you sell any land, make me part of this decision. Make me part of this discussion. Don't only call me to sign for the money. Let me be part of the decision. Now, if we are involving the women, then let's involve the youth. We are sitting on a fairly small time bomb. I call it small because it's not yet, the research we are doing right now is preventing violent extremism among children or the youth. And we're sitting on a time bomb because we have youth who are critical to this country, who are not going to school, who after some years will need some land. So what preparation do we have in place? I don't know how many people of you pass many of the streets in Kampala and the little ones are asking for this, they're cleaning your car, they're really trying to find a living. But is that sustainable, and what are we doing about that? All these are very fundamental. Shared, I would like you to continue to support the women. However, how are we supporting the women? These kind of meetings are very pertinent. And I wanted to give each one of you a paper and ask you a few questions, but 20 minutes won't do the job. But next time, I'm sure we shall have this opportunity. Early warning systems, where the potential land conflicts occur, is very, very important. And this often comes if you do a due process. Then sensitization, of course, on the second and third generation human rights. And the reason I'm saying this is because when you look at the United Nations Security Council Resolution 2250, which is talking about the youth, they talk about partnership. But you're partnering with people who don't know their rights. I don't know how many of us grew up knowing our rights. How many of you knew that you had rights? How many times did you ask the teacher that I would like to go for a short call and say, but you child, you're always playing, you sit down. That could cause another problem. Eh? Who knows that we had rights when we were growing up? To know that you could ask a teacher to explain something a little more. Huh? In this case, the third and second generation human rights, especially the third, are group rights. As youth, they are vulnerable. They are a group that is so targeted. They're easily radicalized because there is nobody to protect them. Someone will come and tell them, I'll take you abroad, don't worry, let's go, let's do this. You know how ADF all came about is because of some of these small delays in understanding the challenges that these youth have. So when a youth is being taken, count 10 of them down because that youth has experience and has influence. If you look at the insecurity around the urban areas that we are studying here today, it is because there is no one who is clearly telling the youth, you have a right to go to school, but all we have to do is find resources. We have a right to try and make a living, but that you have the Ministry of Gender, Labor, and Community Organization to help you to understand your way around. And I think that if that synergy is built around what ministries do, and what NGOs do, and what specialized agencies like this do, it creates a much more harmonious way of appreciating and understanding for people like the youth. Good morning. Before I proceed, I think for you to understand me and know each other, I'm called Nyirabashitsi Sarah Mateke. Most of you normally drop my third name because you can bite yourselves. But you have to
patriotic and learn all the names and languages. I'm a member of Parliament representing the people of Kisoro, 500 kilometers from Kampala. As you go to the border of DRC and Rwanda, and the current Minister of State for Gender, Labour and Social Development in charge of youth and children. It is my pleasure to join you this morning at this opening of this policy advocacy and partnership meeting under the theme Women's Land Rights and Peace Building, from rhetoric to reality. When the doctor was talking, I would have wished you to one day visit my office. Then you will cry every day. Because things of land are real, things of land are painful, and when it gets to women, when it gets to children, when it gets to the youth, it is more painful. This theme prompts us to review progress and evaluate the achievements registered in promoting women's empowerment for the peace and sustainable development, focusing on the women's rights to access and own land, which is a key factor of production. With over 73% of our population living in a rural area and 39% of our households in subsistence economy, sustaining their livelihoods through agriculture, it becomes pertinent for government to focus its development or its development agenda on the needs of this population segment. I would like, therefore, to thank SHADE for organizing this forum, to share experiences and strategies to make women's rights to land and contribution to peace building a reality in Uganda. Indeed, the meeting will enable us to dedicate time to deliberate on the role of women in land management. Ladies and gentlemen, Government of Uganda has ensured a supportive legal and policy environment for the advancement of women, including security of their land for women. The Constitution guarantees the security for land for women, Article 33(4) of the National Land Act, and the National Land Policy 2013 have progressive provisions for ensuring women's access, ownership, and decision-making over land use. Yeah, what is very good, we have them on paper, but actually they do not, it's not what is happening. The Uganda's Vision 2040 and the National Development Plan 3 provide for economic empowerment of women through creation of favorable opportunities while promoting equitable access to productive resources. These resources include land as a critical factor for production. The various initiatives have been seen through progress in land ownership of women or by women. We are also committed globally to the Sustainable Development Goal or goals and have aligned our development frameworks to the global agenda. The percentage of women who own land has doubled over 20 years. That is the whole truth. If you can look at the time when our mothers were at our age, there are very few women who had land. But at the moment, you can see that it has increased. Over a period of 20 years, 16% in 2000, now we are at 32% of women owning agricultural land. This is compared to 68% of men who own agricultural land. You know, the men always want to dominate. God should help us because God gave them that power, but they want to dominate in everything. Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development has been placed strategically at the forefront of NDP 3 implementation as well as implementation of the parish development model as the lead agency of the community mobilization and mindset change, and under the program, as well as the pillar of parish development model, being at the forefront to ensure that communities across the country are effectively mobilized and sensitized for all government initiatives. Through our ministry, we have the opportunity to integrate gender and other cross-cutting concerns, including the issue of women's land rights, into the process of service delivery to all communities across the country. At the operational level, Ministry of Lands, Housing and Urban Development, in collaboration with our ministry and other MDS and stakeholders, has set out our priorities for Uganda in the Gender Strategy for National Land Policy Implementation 2019 and the Action Plan for the Women Land Rights Agenda 2021-2030. Ministry of Gender, Labour and Social Development is coordinating implementation of the third National Action Plan on Women, Peace and Security 2021 to 2025, which has an overall goal to ensure women's meaningful participation and leadership in conflict prevention, resolution and peace building. As a ministry, we shall collaborate with stakeholders in public and private sphere, as well as the civil society and the academia, so that we get strategies that are geared towards women's empowerment. I'd like to point out some of the strategies that have generated positive outcomes for promoting gender equality, peace, and sustainable development. One is enhancing public awareness on women's land rights through continuous sensitization, engagements, and mobilization. Building capacity of land administrators to integrate women's rights in their roles and putting in place mechanisms to enhance women's participation in decision-making positions for land management. Each time, maybe at this juncture, I request the women who have positions, please be there to support your fellow women, especially if their cases are genuine. Have been made to ensure that women access services for education, health infrastructure, energy, water and sanitation, as well as entrepreneurship development. All these initiatives contribute to addressing the socio-economic barriers that limit women from accessing opportunities for economic empowerment. The above efforts notwithstanding, we still face some challenges in securing women's land rights, and of course these include limited data information and data for evidence-based decision-making in youth-friendly service provision, policy and planning. Continued occurrences of gender-based violence, particularly against women and girls. Deep-rooted traditional perceptions, practices and mindsets that limit women's access and control over land and property in Uganda. Ladies and gentlemen, as I conclude, I wish to reiterate government's commitment to women's land rights agenda in Uganda as part of the broader goal to achieve gender equality and women's empowerment. Allow me once again to thank the Executive Director and the management of SHADE for convening this meeting. The country representative of UN Women, or the representative who is here, we also thank you through the Women's Peace and Humanitarian Fund. In this regard, the partnership between government and the UN Women and other UN agencies, development partners, and all stakeholders to promote gender equality and women's empowerment is highly appreciated. I will talk something very small.